You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world.
Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about a lot of things, but mainly her upcoming book, which will be very exciting. So I'm going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Hi, my name is Bri Luna. I am the author of Blood, Sex, Magic, which is going to be released this Halloween. I am also the owner and the creative director of the HoodWitch, which is an online platform I'm sure you may or may not be familiar with, providing you with everyday magic for the modern mystic. You can find me at the HoodWitch on Instagram and at the HoodWitch on pretty much all social media platforms.
Love it. Thank you. And listeners, as always, I will have that linked in the show notes so you can find it easily. And I do want to chat all about your book because I have it in hand and I'm obsessed. It is beautiful. So we're absolutely going to dive into that. But first, I want to start more at the beginning. And if anyone is not familiar, I'd love to just chat about what sort of got you started in this realm, and especially with creating content online and sharing that aspect of your life with such a large audience.
Ooh, okay. So let's see. We can start from, I guess, like my initial fascination with magic and, you know, the unseen realms has always been really since my childhood. I have been a naturally very psychic, intuitive child. At that time, I didn't really know what that meant. So there were a lot of like unexplained situations. I always laugh and I call it death energy because I'd be able to like go into rooms and I'd be like, oh my God, you always felt a presence. So if it wasn't like seeing things or audibly like hearing like spirits or, I didn't really know how to explain it at that time. So being that I, grew up and just sort of like pushed it aside when I was in my tweens and teens, I really delved into learning more about magic and witchcraft. And so as a teen, I spent a great deal of time, in like bookstores and new age shops and occult stores and just really trying to learn as much as I could. At that time, it really wasn't like something that was easily accessible. I'm a millennial, so I mean, it's like still sort of like the beginning era of like the internet, you know what I mean? So that it wasn't as accessible as it is now, and you'd have to really research or just know someone or, be born into a very specific tradition. So anyway, that was really like my love of all things paranormal and occult and esoteric. I just spent a lot of time in libraries and bookstores and also meeting, like other magical people. I grew up in Southern California and Los Angeles, so spent a lot of time in Venice Beach. And if you're from Los Angeles, there are a lot of magical weirdos there. So that really shaped me, but just growing up like with my grandmothers, I speak about them a lot in this book, my family's matriarchal lineage and magic and my relationship to that. And as a Black and Mexican woman, I didn't really see my grandmothers as being witches, by the definition from what I saw on TV. We watched like, like The Wizard of Oz, or everyone has these ideas of like what a witch is as a child. And so I didn't see my grandmothers as being, like ugly with like warts and, they were the opposite of that. But culturally, I really began to delve back into our ancestral practices after I became a mom. And so that was another sort of like psychic, magical awakening for me and really helped me to deepen my own spiritual practice. So fast forward to, wow, it's been like 10 years of doing HoodWitch. I had been working as a esthetician. So many of my clients, I was doing skincare, and it's always very personal, when you're connecting with someone and you're touching their skin and, like really in that type of an atmosphere. So I began reading uh, my clients' tarot. That's where the real crossover kind of happened, where like I had already been into tarot, like doing it since a teen. And then it was more so just like a private practice for family and for friends. But then listening to a lot of my clients in my salon that I owned, I really connected with them. And so I would read for them. And somehow I just wanted to share my practices, and I didn't really feel like there was a space for me, especially 10 years ago. There weren't too many, women of color in or even on like social media doing what I was doing. So like sharing information about the new and full moon, which I know sounds absurd now because everybody and their mom has, they're a witch, and there's a witch blog and a bruja, and everyone has something witch and astrologer. So it's very accessible right now. But the way that I was doing it, for those who aren't familiar with me, I really I got into working a lot of pop-up markets within my neighborhood, within my community. So offering tarot readings in person at these pop-up markets. I made herbal tea blends. I sold crystals. That's what I was like really known for. I had tons of crystals and pendulums and tarot decks. Like I was a store, I became an online store. And a lot of people were brought in by my visuals because they were so different at that time. Everyone was really focused on like still the Tumblr, very like black and silver witch, or kind of gothy, or American Horror Story. It was more of like that genre. But then here I come, I'm like colorful, and I have like these really long acrylic stiletto nails with like very intricate designs, and I'm holding crystals. So like you had these very powerful images of like disembodied hands holding these very large crystals, or you know what I mean? So I was sharing rituals, and I was sharing things that I was really into in my practice, and doing it from the lens of a Black and Latina woman. And that was very, very different at that time. And so that was really how that started, I guess, like with, back then I didn't really see it as like creating content. I just was sharing, because how Instagram at that time, it was more so like everyone was really sharing. There wasn't no one really cared about like how do I explain it? Like no one was really, there weren't like ads, or you know what I mean? Like it wasn't seen as like a commodification. It was more so like, oh, I'm a witch, so I'm gonna share this like tea recipe, or I'm going to share this moon ritual. It was it was just very direct. So that's how it really got started. I can't believe I'm gonna be celebrating like 10 years in November this year of
It's
the
so
HoodWitch.
exciting though. Oh my gosh.
Right?
I love it. No, your story is so interesting to me, and absolutely what I went through as well. Because really when we started, and there wasn't, or like it was beginning of the internet, and the internet was untrustworthy. Okay. We did not have Wikipedia. You were not getting accurate results back then, but I can see how you wouldn't feel very represented in that, because a lot of what was available to us was Wiccan based. And that's
Yes.
a lot of that witchcraft was, when we were going and like looking stuff up. And just because of where Wicca came from and what it's based on, is going to be heavily Celtic, British Isles. And I could absolutely see why you would not feel reflected in any of that information.
Exactly. And so it was really it was a little challenging, for me. And I was like, well, my family, having such a colorful and rich culture where it was like having hoodoo and, espiritismo and like curanderas, like having all of this like folk magic and tradition already in my family and not something that I learned from a book. It was more so like me realigning back to myself. You know what I mean? And I even look back on the early days of HoodWitch where I'm like, oh, like that's really cool. But I've even evolved more from that, so it's just it's very, I think that our spiritual practice should always be evolving and growing, and it's just been such a journey. I've loved connecting and seeing so many ways how everyone is now sharing their magic in this space. And I love seeing women of color and like witches of color and like brujas all like showing a form of like representation, and everyone's going to have something really great to contribute. And I feel so honored and so proud to have been at like the forefront of what we're seeing, this like modern witch renaissance or this resurgence. Because, and it's not to say that this is something brand new. We all know that witchcraft and magic has existed throughout every continent, on this planet. And so there is unique forms of magic and paganism and, all of these practices that have come before Christianity and like patriarchal, ways of thinking and beliefs. So I do think it's so cool how, many people are like decolonizing their ways of practicing magic and going back to their pre-Christian roots, be that with like voodoo or, Santeria, like all of these practices that are coming out of the shadows or coming out from the underground, and they're being represented and they're being showcased. So, and even seeing like, there's so many cool like pagan witches that I follow that are like, Romanian witches and like Viking witches, like Norwegian. I just love it. I love seeing all of these people reclaiming their ancestral birthright, like their connection back to earth, our connection back to the cycles of nature and taking care of our spirits and our elders. Like that really means a lot to me.
I'm having the best time just watching all of this content on, YouTube, Instagram, and everyone sharing, because there are so many aspects of witchcraft and like folk traditions in North America that came from Mexico, from Africa, from the people like mixing and being able, like those witches reclaiming that and being able to like teach it and explain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I finally understand where this idea came from in the first place. I'm like, why does that superstition exist? Like, where did that even come from in this folk practice that I have? And then actually learning like the whole history and background from all of these various witches is so much fun to me.
I love it. And I mean, I especially love, I know that people, and this is something that I faced when I did start HoodWitch, a lot of the old school practitioners, I think they were a little apprehensive and a little hesitant where they're like, well, not everything is for everyone. And we understand that, there are certain practices that require initiation and are closed, like not everything is for everyone. And I respect that and I understand that. And I do think that that's a huge part of and you have some people who are like, well, that's gatekeeping. And it's like, well, no, this is, each path and religion, and every tradition is going to have closed practices. And that's something that you need to be mindful of. There's just certain responsibilities that come with information and initiation. And, that's how it is. And I respect it, but I'm only speaking, especially like in my book, from my practice, from my beliefs, from how I, was raised and from my lived experience. So of course, like what I share, I completely back 100%. And you know what I'm saying? It's like what I share is like, I share information that I don't mind the general public knowing. So there's nothing that I would share online that I would not feel 100% comfortable with giving someone directly Does that make sense? So I'm like, I don't think people should share information of things that like they don't personally do or that they wouldn't do.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Because there are a lot of close practices, and I understand what people say about gatekeeping, which I do not love that term at all. But pretty much every religion has their own form of that. Even, the standard ones, you have baptisms and you have bat mitzvahs. Those things are part of like an initiatory practice because that religion is closed and you are initiating those people and you are teaching them specific things. So it's just these practices of witchcraft can also have those same practices and be closed to people who are not going to go through those initiations.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like there's just certain precautions that people should take. But to kind of go back into what we were saying, how, I really love the cultural exchange or like learning. It's like I've been learning so much recently about like Appalachian magic from like watching practitioners on like TikTok and like on different social media platforms. And I love like how there's just such a crossover from my own family, being from the South, and just how those generational recipes and stories they cross culture, and I love it. You know what I mean? So I'm like, this is great. I love this story. I'm like, oh wow, like my grandma said the same thing. I recently saw one where they were talking about not whistling at night. And that's something my grandmother used to say. And I found myself telling my son that because he likes to whistle, like he'll hum or like whistle songs in the house. And I'm like, stop whistling at night. And he's like, Mom, like, why? And I'm just like, because it's bad. It's like you call in bad spirits. And everyone, in my family has always known that. But like whistling at night or like whistling at night in a forest and not responding back if you hear your name called in the forest at night
Oh yeah.
or like in the woods at night. So I'm just like, oh, like these are things that, cross culture. And I think maybe, it has a lot to do with just living in the same spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Your son's like already learning.
Right? He's like, Mom, he's like, I like to whistle. And I'm like, not in this house, not at night. And also another funny one, it's like you have to wash your dishes, all of your dishes. Don't leave dirty dishes out overnight because you will attract hungry ghosts. And also I've read that it will make you and your partner quarrel, like have fights, the next day. So these
I
are just,
do. Yep, I do. I do that one because I have a house spirit and they're mad if I leave the dishes overnight. So I always do it. I can like tell the change in energy in my house if I don't do the dishes.
Yeah, they're like, I gotta clean it. But my partner was laughing. He's like, don't you think that's just something that your parents told you so that you'd clean up and do your chores? And I'm like, no. I was like, yes, that's funny, but no.
That is funny. All these could potentially just be parents trying to get their kids to do chores.
Right? No, we were laughing about this. I was chatting with my sister about it, where it's like if you get your feet swept with a broom, how and like a lot of like I guess it would well for me it would be like my grandmother would be like, oh, you're not gonna get married. Like if you get your feet swept over, it's like bad luck for a relationship. And so I'm like, you're supposed to spit on the broom if that happens. It varies from like spitting on the broom or spitting on the person who swept your feet. And I was like, oh my God, you cannot spit on the person who swept you. Like that was an accident. But I'm just laughing. So it's like you're supposed to spit on the broom. I've also heard like throwing like pinches of salt behind your shoulder. So yeah, it's like all of these things, there's just it's always just such a cross cultural thing, especially like in the American South of these type of traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, switching over then to chatting specifically about your book, which I said at the beginning is absolutely beautiful. So excited to have it in my hands. And for listeners, this is coming out. Halloween is such a great publication date, by the way.
I know, and I didn't even
coming out on the 31st. It's very exciting.
What's so funny is that like I didn't even plan that. It was one of those things where they showed me a calendar and they're like, oh, these are all the dates that like our authors have picked. Here are the dates left. And I was like, you mean no one picked Halloween? Like, what?
What?
I was like, I want October 31st. Of course I want that date. So I picked Halloween, and I think it's perfect because now my book baby gets to be born on Halloween, and it's also a Scorpio. Like the HoodWitch site, when I launched that in November, it's also a Scorpio. So I have two Scorpio creative babies.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's such a great date. I'm so excited for you. But I would love for you to let the listeners know what they can expect if they haven't like looked up a blurb or anything yet. What is this book all about?
So I really don't want to say it's like it's roughly, I mean, I honestly I love it. It's beautiful. It's like a visually stunning collection of spells and stories. It's like the perfect modern grimoire. Like it's perfect. It has history, it has ritual, it has magic. It's very visual, much like my site. So if you followed me for a while, you know that I love symbolism, I love imagery. Each of the pages, I'm so proud to say that I designed myself one by one. I worked with a designer at Harper One, and I was very very hands-on with how I wanted this book to look and feel. And it was important for me to include many of my own personal photographs from my family, from artists that I've worked with. And yeah, I mean, it's just visually so much more stunning than I even imagined that it was going to be. And I'm so excited for all of you guys to just get your hands on it, because it's truly going to be something very different in terms of like magic books that you have. There's nothing like it on the market. So you need to check it out and buy it.
Yes, I totally agree with that. The pages are beautiful. It's absolutely a labor of love to design something like that, because it's not just filling it with that information. You're picking the photos and the font and the layout of the pages to like all make sense in this very magical way. And it's a beautiful way to do things.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that's like, I'm really proud, obviously, of the stories I shared. And it's like, when you're writing, you're always like, well, how much am I being too self-indulgent? Am I not being indulgent enough? Am I holding back? I think this is truly like, I'm looking at it right now. I'm like holding my book, and I just cried, when I got it in my hands, and I was like, this is so beautiful. Because when I was approached to do a book, the first thing I had in my mind, I already knew what I wanted it to look like. So before I even wrote anything on the pages, I knew what I wanted it to look like. And I knew what I wanted the readers to experience with holding a book like this. I could have kept going. To be honest with you, I was like, it took me so long to really edit this down and I really appreciate Harper for being patient with me. I started doing this book in the beginning of the COVID lockdown. So having a lot of isolation and time alone was scary, and there was just so much like uncertainty at that time. But I'm very grateful that I was able to really pull through, and this is truly, it is like a labor of love. And I think it's a testimony of like a cycle of completion. You know what I mean? Like from the beginning of the pandemic, a culmination of like stories from my life, from when I was a baby, from my family, my mom, my grandmother, like it's just sharing all of these things. It feels so good to see it come to life now and on these pages. And now I get to send it out into the world to all of you.
I love all the family photos in there. They're so sweet.
What? Oh my God, it's so vulnerable because
Oh
when you
yeah,
look at my
it
page,
is.
like I don't post photos of myself on HoodWitch. Like I've always been so used to being behind the scenes and giving and giving and giving. And so now this was about myself and my journey and what I wanted to share. So it does feel a bit vulnerable to put your childhood photos into, but I think it gives it really gives a full picture of who is behind this.
It does. And you really see the family resemblance between all of the photos. I'm like, oh my gosh, you could like see exactly how it was passed down. You're so cute.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but my mom was laughing and she's like, I love this photo and I like this one. And I was like, okay, thank you, Mom. We can't put this is not the family album as much
Your
as I
mom
would
is
love
so
for
pretty.
right. Thank you. I was like, as much as I would love for this to be the family photo album, I have to narrow it down just to some photos. So I'm happy with the way that it turned out. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. I think that's really beautiful. How did you decide because you talked about struggling to narrow down the contents. How did you decide the sections of blood, sex, and magic and decide that as your book title name? Where did that come from?
Oh my God. Okay. So funny enough, I was talking to my literary agent, and this is this is like in the early days of like the manuscript. And I was like chatting with him. I was like, I'm putting all my blood, sweat, and tears, all of my blood, sex, and magic into this. And so we were just like cracking up about it. And I was like, wait a minute, blood, sex, magic. I was like, I love that. I was like, this is fun. I was like, blood, sex, and magic, all of my favorite things. I was like, I think this sounds like a perfect book name. And then my edit, sorry, tongue tied. My literary agent, he was like, that sounds really sexy. Like, it actually sounds really good. And I was like, I know, I love it. Let's see, if Harper will go for it. And so he like comes back and he's like, they love it. They actually like want your manuscript, and that's what it's called. So I was like, fuck yeah, like blood, sex, magic. And then I ended up just breaking down the components of it where I'm like, okay, well, blood, I can't literally write about blood magic, which I really want to do. But maybe that will have to be saved for like, some other classes or like workshop, something else. But like it's too much of a liability, I was told. So can talk about blood magic. But blood, in the less literal terms and the more symbolic, I went into ancestral magic. So lineage, talking about my family history, connection to the women in my family, the witchiness in the family, the magic of the family, right? So that's where blood is just really focusing on ancestry, uh, connecting to your ancestors, connecting to that part of yourself. Sex is pretty direct. I'm talking about spells of magnetism and sex magic, manifesting with your orgasms, sort of the history of that, like a tarot for cheaters. Because I know everybody gets that question, especially if you're a reader. We always have clients and friends and ourselves, even where we're like questioning our relationship. So I get into that too. Yeah, just talking about like my toxic relationships that I've had in the past and like pregnancy and abortion and child loss. So it really gets into some things that like, I don't talk about on social media, and I wanted to save it for the book. And then magic, we talk about like general spells of empowerment. So if there's the one takeaway from people reading my book is like, this is from my lived experience. This is not my this is not the be all and end all. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing with you. So if you take anything from it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But, I am putting this out there into the world because it's something different, it's interesting, it's healing, and it's empowering, and that's something that I really am excited to put into the world.
I am getting a lot from it already. I still have to work my way through it and do a lot of the things in there. I started backwards because I do want to incorporate a lot of the ancestor magic like into late October and early November. That's like the perfect season for me. to
Yes.
work on those things. So I instead went to the back and I like went straight to the manicures.
I love it. The
I love your
beauty,
nail
like,
section.
I had to. I'm sorry because, like, I've spent so much, and this is why feel like it's so different from like other like magic books, because people don't seem to understand where it's like I love like glamour magic, beauty magic. I'm really all about like taking care of yourself, and for me, going back where I have a section that's called the altar of nails. It almost to me feels like it ties right back into blood, because my ritual with my grandmother was getting our nails done. And that was something that, I love doing with my grandmother and my mom. It was a way that we, ritualistically got together on Sundays, or, you know what I mean? Like every other Sunday, we would go have lunch, we'd get our nails done, and we would talk and they would gossip. And that was our beauty ritual. That was something that made us feel good, and it made me feel connected to the women in my family. So it's something I looked forward to, and it's something that I still carry on now, but without my grandmother. She's there in spirit. But I did end up getting a tattoo of a nail polish bottle for my grandmother when she passed away.
Oh, that's a great tattoo.
Yeah, she wore the same nail polish color for like 30 something years.
I
She
love,
never
I
changed.
love grandmas that do that.
Right? I was like, there's something special about that. And so I am born under the sun sign of Taurus. So I am a Venusian. Like, I love aesthetic and beauty rituals and self-care and pampering and adornment. And all of those things are a part of my magical practice. So I didn't want to leave that out. And that to me uh, felt authentic. I didn't want to just like fill up my book with a bunch of bullshit that like I didn't actually do. It's like I wanted to share what I did like and what I do practice and what is meaningful to me. So if that's like color magic or the symbolism of why, whatever, that it just I enjoy. uh I love art. I love art and magic and beauty, and I think all of those things are coexist with each other.
Yeah, your book really does take everything full circle. It's not three separate sections that have nothing to do with each other. It really all melds together. So I just love the entire concept, but especially excited to dive more into that ancestor work. But I did start with nails. So I was like, this is the first.
You're like, what is this?
I was like drawn to it right away, like the altar of nails and the whole manicure section. I was like, yes, wait, I gotta start.
You know what's even funnier too is that like the images from that section I took years ago. These are not like this, not like just like a stock image. Like those hands of like the manicured nails, that actually is from the nail shop that I would go to with my grandmother. There's a sign where you see all of these like black and brown hands. It says airbrush design. It's actually the opening page of Altar of Nails. That sign, I wish that they didn't throw it away. All of those hands are from the 90s, like the early 90s. And all of those nails were like intricately designed by the woman that I'm talking about in my story. So you guys will have to read it. But those were her nail art designs. She did all of those by hand. And she was lovely. So yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things I always say, like that should be archived. And it's sad because they just got rid of it. I don't even know if they exist anymore. Because most people now, they really are into like different types of nail art. So to them, like that is outdated, or you know what I mean? So like they get rid of like all of their history. And I'm like, no, like you guys used to have like 35 millimeter portrait, like physical, like tangible pictures. I was like, don't you know that this could be like archived? I was like, this is now a lost part of history that like we don't have that documentation anymore because they didn't really see the significance in it. But you have like little nerds like me where I'm like, no, save it.
Well, you did save it in a way.
I
So,
did. I like took photos of it myself before they got rid of it. So
and so it's nice to be able to see that. I was like, this is fun. And this is just the fun section. And I mean, your whole book is like that, though, of like the bright colors and everything. I'm like, yes.
thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think, as like women are like women identifying people, we all have our rituals that make us feel beautiful, that make us feel confident. If it's not nails for someone, it could be like, their hair, or it could be, just anything, like just something that you do that is meaningful to you or like empowering to you. That's what my nails felt like for me. And I think for a lot of women, specifically like women of color, our nail art and, having that is a form of like self-expression and creativity. So I embrace it and I love it. Still something that I really absolutely enjoy.
Speaking of empowerment rituals, do you have anything planned for this Halloween for the launch of your book?
Yes, I do. So I can't wait to dress up. I was thinking, I'm like, what am I gonna be this year? I was like, I want to go like full body paint. Like I want to like do something outrageous. So I'll have to see how much time or like energy I really have to invest in a costume. But I can't pass it up. It's like, hello, your book launches on Halloween. So I am going to be doing a signing and a reading at Elliott Bay book company in Seattle, Washington. And then following up with that is Dia de los Muertos. So like I think I'm going to be doing a live, but that's like TBA. I'm not sure about that. But I do know 100% I'm going to have a book release at Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle.
Oh, I am jealous of everyone listening to this that is in Seattle that could go. Oh
I
man.
know it's at 7 p.m. I forgot to say it's at 7 p.m. And then afterwards, we have a funny little event planned at this place called the Gemini Lounge. It's also in Seattle. They have like astrology themed cocktails, which is going to be very cute.
Oh man. I
I
want
know.
you so bad. What a great way to spend Halloween.
I know. I'm like, it falls on a Tuesday. So I'm like, most people are going to be like raging and like partying like on Friday and Saturday, but save some energy for me.
Oh, that is going to be a good time. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I'm really excited too. And if we have listeners in Los Angeles, I'm going to be at the Theosophical Library in Los Angeles November 14th.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, that's gonna be really fun. So I hope I got that name right.
That sounds right. It sounds familiar, so I think you did.
Okay, just making sure. Can you hear me still?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great. So, yeah, it's the Theosophical Library. So I'm like, I hope I got this correct.
It sounds familiar. I think you did.
Okay, well, hey, whatever. If not, you guys are gonna go to the wrong place. No, I'm kidding.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your history with new listeners and for chatting about your book. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I am just so proud of all of the work that you have done and how far you have come since in the last 10 years. My goodness.
I know, right?
Just amazing. Congratulations on your book coming out.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to update that. It's the Philosophical Research Society in Seattle. I mean,
There you go.
sorry, I'm so sorry. The Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles will be November 14th. I'm really excited and thank you so much for having me. I'm just really thrilled. I feel so honored and I'm really just excited about putting this book into the world.
And it's absolutely beautiful. I can't, say that enough. And I know that there are pictures out there floating around. So hopefully you guys listening will check that out and go pre-order or pick that up in person, especially if you are able to go in Seattle or Los Angeles. I will be very jealous of you guys.
Yay!
Well, that's everything that I have for you all this week. I will see you next week.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content. Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.